Hi, I'm Tom Richardson, and this is BookNet Canada's Standards Overview for Spring 2020. It should have been part of the Tech Forum presentations, but COVID-19 got in the way. All of the slides in this presentation are text, with no charts or any illustrations. I'll make that one announcement here and read the slides with some annotated comment. First slide. There is one gigantic piece of news, and that concerns Onyx 3.0. Amazon announced their expectation that all Onyx files provided to them are to be sent as 3.0. The deadline for starting is December 31st, 2020, and this applies only to physical book feeds. Well, digital book feeds were excluded by Amazon. They actually expect them to transition shortly after that. No date's been set up for that, but given digital feeds are more likely to be supported in 3.0, this is unlikely to be an additional problem. Next slide. Other retailers. What's going on with them? Indigo and 49th Shelf are reviewing Onyx 3.0. Kobo and most US retailers who accept 2.1 have some capacity to accept Onyx 3.0 now, but they have not formally started to do that. They will likely start this year as more 3.0 data becomes available, but there is still no systematic acceptance of 3.0 in the North American supply chain that we are aware of. Next slide. Other trading partners. Well, Canadian distributors and wholesalers, many of whom actually accept and distribute Onyx 2.1 now, are aware of this deadline. Some of them have a capacity to work in 3.0, and others with proprietary software likely do not. Any company who is submitting data to these companies should be aware that accepting 2.1 and distributing 3.0 is not actually a very straightforward operation. They should not assume that conversion is a service that their distributor or other provider can be fitting into their systems. Canadian publishers, many of them use software or data companies capable of producing Onyx 3.0, and many have already established a 3.0 feed with Amazon. Some publishers, however, appear to be unaware of Amazon's request, which is a little bit disturbing. What's going on with BookNet Canada? Biblioshare can fully accept both types, 2.1 and 3.0, and it supports the most current version in either, which would be for Onyx 3.0, 3.0.7, or 2.1, 2.1 version 4. But at this time, only 10% of the data that we receive is available in 3.0. So we have approximately 3.5 million 2.1 records, but we only have around 300,000 3.0 records. We need more 3.0 to build services to support 3.0 services. Catalyst. Well, specific data for 3.0 is being used. Contributor place, the composite, which includes location values for city names so that you can provide where an author currently lives and what city he's in. That's being supported now. And support for the new Onyx edition promotional event is planned. Catalyst remains primarily based on Onyx 2.1 because that version is what Biblioshare can supply. The general advice is act now. Now is not too soon to be creating Onyx 3.0 test files, and Biblioshare is a great place to start with. To meet Amazon's deadline, you should have production capabilities for Onyx 3.0 files available by the end of the summer. Well, what about Onyx 2.1? You should expect to maintain Onyx 2.1 feeds during the transition to 3.0. You cannot expect a hard change date across an entire supply chain, and you cannot expect to maintain 2.1 forever. Switch as soon as practical, please. Well, are you ready? And what do you need? BookNet Canada has many resources and will release more shortly. A great start would be Graham Bell's webinar on the transition from 2.1 to 3.0, which is available on our site at the URLs listed below. BISG just announced on the same day I recorded this that they are having Graham do an expanded version with more examples. So it's basically the same webinar. The information doesn't really change. It's just bigger. A good half hour more material by editor and a question and answer session. That's being held on May 5th. Watch ours as a preparation for watching it, and I believe it will be available on the BISG website after. Amazon had one other announcement. Onyx for Books has an acknowledgement format specification, and Amazon expects to start using it. What does it do? Well, that's actually decided between trading partners, so Amazon will have to sort of say how it plans to use it. But it is intended to do things like confirm receipt of the original Onyx message, report to the original sender a summary of records processed and updated in the recipient's database, report details of any errors encountered or queries about the product data supplied, or return to sender details any proprietary identifier assigned by the recipient, such as Amazon's ASIN. And it's intended for two-way communication, so companies can send and receive it to improve communication. Now, whether or not that's done is really between the two trading partners, but it is designed for that. So what's new for Onyx for Books in general? As I said earlier, we're now at version 3.0.7. And beyond improvements in efficiency and greater accuracy, the transition from 2.1 to 3.0 brings with it an entire decade of development. We're now at version 7, which introduces a whole new block, also called 7, dedicated to trading information on promotional events, such as author tours. And finally, just released, Onyx Codelist Issue 49, which, amongst many other things, includes more support for audiobooks. What's new in Thema? Thema is the subject category scheme for a global book trade. Version 1.4 is about to be released. Look for it soon. It's greatly expanded. There's lots of improvements in it. If your company cares about diversity and targets accessibility to expand your audience, you need Thema. And it supports better than any other subject category system that's available for you. And now it's also translated into 20 languages, which will support your foreign marketing. It's a good thing, and it's been underutilized in North America. It's really time to change that. Indigenous codes. There's some ongoing work in the subjects, which I'll cover off as a group, as there are a number of new Indigenous code proposals being developed and already added. In the BISAC subject category system, new codes were added in 2019, and there are further codes upcoming, replacement codes that are trying to provide a Canadian alternative to the current codes referencing Native American. Similarly, in Thema 1.4, there's a new qualifier in List 5 for related to Indigenous people. It will allow us to develop national extensions off it. So while it's not clear that we need to do that, we will have the option to do that if needed. Note that use of a Canadian geography code would be expected any time it's being used, and that would place the book localized to a specific region in Canada or North America. So there's no specific need to say it's a Canadian Indigenous group because it will already be stated. And this sort of code is usable for books by an Indigenous author that may not otherwise have that as a subject option. As well, there are additions to the languages. We're getting new language codes into the system to support as many of the Indigenous languages as we can. ISNI.org. ISNI is the International Standard Name Identifier. BookNet Canada is a member organization. BTLF, our sister organization in Quebec, is a registrar. ISNI is a persistent unique identifier for content producers suitable and recommended for identification of both authors and publishers. Now, we've been talking about persistent identifiers at Tech Forum for years, so why not try one today? Between 50 and 70% of Canadian authors already have one assigned, and there's no associated cost with adding those to feeds now. And as well, a fair number of the publishers have their own entities already assigned, and that's because Canadian libraries and other institutions have been working ahead of us. Now, our favorite identifier, the ISBN 13, can start with 979 as well as 978. I think most of us know this, and we've made the transition to 979 ISBN 13s. If anyone is unsure about any of this, get in touch. But it's worth bringing up now because 979, with a prefix of 8 after that, are now being assigned by the US ISBN agency, Bowker. That 8 prefix is reserved for the United States. Now, as a reminder, ISBN 10s are not compatible with 979 ISBN 13s. It is more than well past time to stop relying on ISBN 10-based reports. Now, Amazon's standard identification numbers, also known as ASINs, remains as 10 characters. But a 979 ISBN's ASIN is not derived out of an ISBN 10 calculation. That's the way it's been done for 978 ones, but it doesn't remain the same for 979 ones. So it's easy to understand with an example. So 979, 109, 128, 5445 is a valid 979 ISBN. Its ASIN is B07Q8Q7BDQ, and that is definitely not an ISBN 10. Just for general reference, ISBN Canada does not know what prefixes will be assigned to Canada with 979s. 978 ISBNs will continue to be assigned here for the foreseeable future, at least for the next year or two. Now, my final 2 slides complete my standards overview. We'd like to remind people that BookNet Canada is heavily involved in them. We administer PubNet. That's an EDI system for standardized transaction documents between retailers and distributors. And we're involved in subject standards such as the book trade subject schemes like BISG and Thema, already talked about. We work in identifiers like ISBN and ISNI, and we would do ISTC too if anyone could agree that they were a good idea, but we definitely are involved in work identifiers. We monitor activities of the W3C and what it's doing in EPUBs, and in general GS1, another standards organization, who have their GTIN identifiers that we're familiar with, and also location codes, GDSNs, and other location identifiers like SANS. Now, we work with other standard organizations heavily, in particular with BISG, our US counterpart, and we have staff members sitting on their metadata, workflow, subject, supply chain, and identifier committees. Noah Genner, our CEO, serves on editors' steering committees for both Onyx and Thema, and I participate in them as well. Finally, the B&C standards are through our Bibliographic Committee, and it represents the Canadian English Language National Group for Onyx and the Canadian English Language National Group for Thema. And we need to put it that way because BTLF, our Quebec sister organization, represents the Canadian French Language National Group for those 2 organizations. BookNet and the BTLF are happy collaborators. Now, this completes my standards presentation. Please get in touch if you have any questions. Please get in touch if you'd like to serve on a working group for Thema. There are some things we could do to improve it if people participate. If you want to participate in the Bibliographic Committee, or would just like to find out how you can make standards work better for your organization, come talk to me. I'm always available for it. Thank you.